At 67 years old, after 4 decades working as a seamstress out of my house in Southside Atlanta, I never thought I'd hear my daughter-in-law Sophia celebrate my absence from my son Michael's wedding, as if my presence were a curse she had finally dodged. That Saturday morning, I woke up before sunrise, just as I had done every day since my husband Harold passed away 15 years ago, carefully pressed my best navy blue dress, the one I'd bought specifically for this occasion after saving up for 3 months, fixed my hair with care, put on my mother's pearl earrings, and checked the gift I'd prepared for the 5th time, a complete set of hand-embroidered sheets that had taken me 2 months to finish, working every night after completing my daily sewing orders. This was the wedding of Michael, my only child, the boy I raised alone after Harold died in a work accident when we were barely 35. But trouble started when I left my house headed for the First Metropolitan Baptist Church downtown, as the main water pipe on Clover Lane had burst overnight, completely flooding the main avenue, with firefighters blocking off 3 city blocks and forcing all traffic onto back streets I'd never navigated before. My neighbor Maria yelled from her window, "Eleanor, you can't get out this way. It's all shut down since 5 in the morning." So I had to walk 15 blocks in my high heels until I found a taxi willing to take the long route around the city periphery. And by the time I arrived at First Metropolitan, the ceremony was already over. I looked for the main entrance to the reception hall, marked by arches, but got confused in the parking lot and ended up walking toward the back of the venue, where there was a small garden with benches for the bridesmaids to rest between photos. And that's where I heard the unmistakable voice of Sophia talking to her friends Brooke and Ashley. Thank goodness she missed the whole ceremony. You know how she is, always with her sad stories, always talking about how hard it was raising Michael alone, always reminding everyone she doesn't have money. It's better that she only showed up now. With Brooke laughing and adding, "Oh, mothers-in-law are like that, always playing the victim. My mom says it's typical of those older ladies who have nothing else to do but stick their noses in their kids' lives." And Ashley finishing, "Plus, can you imagine if she had shown up in that old outfit? You can tell she doesn't know how to dress for elegant occasions. It's better this way, right? No poor mother-in-law drama." The 3 of them laughing while I stood frozen behind a bougainvillea tree, feeling their words pierce my chest like a jolt of cold electricity. Old outfit? This dress had cost me the equivalent of a week's pay. Sad stories? I only told them about my life when they asked, trying to be honest about my circumstances without sounding whiny. Poor mother-in-law drama? For 2 years, I'd financially helped Michael and Sophia with the down payment for their condo, slowly giving them my savings every month until they had the $8,000 they needed. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, checked my makeup in my purse mirror, and walked into the ballroom through the main door with a calm smile. "Eleanor, thank heavens you made it!" Michael shouted when he saw me running to hug me. "Mom, I thought something terrible had happened to you." And I hugged him tight, inhaling the scent of his new cologne, feeling the expensive fabric of his suit against my cheek. "A pipe burst on my street, son, but I wasn't going to miss your wedding for anything in the world." Sophia approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mother Peril, what a shame you missed the ceremony. It was so beautiful." And I kissed her on the cheek and said, "The important thing is that you're married now. God bless you both." Throughout the entire reception, I began to notice familiar behaviors I'd previously ignored or rationalized. My sister-in-law, Vanessa, Michael's aunt, introduced me to some people as Michael's mom. But when other guests asked about my work or my life, she quickly changed the subject or pulled her conversation partners away. My nephew Jordan, Vanessa's son, barely greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek before disappearing among the younger guests. My nieces Lily and Harper, who used to always seek me out to chat at family gatherings, this time only exchanged courtesy greetings before finding excuses to leave. When it was time to open the gifts, I watched every reaction carefully. The expensive gifts from Sophia's bridesmaids and relatives were met with genuine exclamations of joy and prolonged gratitude. But when Michael opened my package with the embroidered sheets, Sophia quickly lifted them, muttered an automatic "Thanks, Mother Peril," and immediately placed them under the table with the other minor gifts, the sheets on which I'd invested 60 nights of labor, embroidering intertwined initials and tiny flowers, treated as an inconvenient formality to be swiftly dealt with. And it was at that moment, watching my gift of love be discarded with indifference, that the words I'd heard in the garden gained a deeper meaning. It wasn't just the cruel comment of a nervous daughter-in-law on her wedding day, but a reflection of how they truly saw me as someone inconvenient, outdated, out of place in their prosperous modern lives, a relic of Michael's past that they preferred to keep on the sidelines of his new married life. During dinner, I sat at a table with people I didn't know well, distant relatives of Sophia's who were polite but aloof, and from my seat I could see the main table where Michael and Sophia were, surrounded by their closest friends, all young professionals dressed in expensive clothes, talking about topics I didn't fully grasp: investments, international trips, exclusive restaurants, as if an invisible world separated us, a social barrier I didn't know when it had been built. The dancing started with modern music I didn't recognize. The younger guests took over the floor while the older ones remained chatting at the tables, and I waited all night for Michael to come and ask me to dance as he always did at family parties, but he was completely absorbed in his new wife and his friends. At 11 o'clock at night, when the party was in full swing, I decided to go and say goodbye. "Son, I'm heading out now. I have to work early tomorrow." And Michael gave me a distracted hug. "Already leaving, Mom? Okay, have a good night. Thanks for coming." With Sophia giving me an equally automatic farewell kiss. "Thanks for coming, Mother Peril. See you soon." But in her eyes I saw something that confirmed what I'd feared all night: relief. She was relieved I was leaving, that her perfect party could continue without the awkward presence of the humble mother-in-law who didn't fit into their new, prosperous life as a couple. The cab ride home was silent, and during the 40-minute drive, I mentally reviewed every detail of the night. The conversations where I was ignored, the moments where I was left talking alone, the embarrassing introductions where Vanessa minimized my importance, the indifference to my gift, Michael's lack of interest in including me in his important conversations, and for the first time in my life, I began to wonder if I'd been living in a bubble of self-deception, believing I was an important part of my son's life when in reality, I was merely a family obligation to be fulfilled occasionally, but not one that interfered with his real life. That night, in my small Southside apartment, I sat in the rocking chair where I used to embroider and began to remember all the sacrifices I had made so Michael could get to where he was. The years of working double shifts to pay for his private school when the local public schools weren't good. The times I sold my own things to buy him new clothes when he started dating Sophia, who came from an upper middle class family. The Sundays I spent cooking for them when they were dating, preparing elaborate dishes that Sophia photographed for her social media, but never learned to cook herself. And I also recalled the times Sophia had made seemingly innocent comments that now took on a different meaning. "Mother Peril, why don't you buy more modern clothes? Michael has the money to help you." Or, "Doesn't it bother you that people know you're still working at your age? Michael's a professional now." Or the time she suggested I cut my hair shorter because a woman my age looks better with short hair and less fuss. Comments that I'd interpreted as well-intentioned advice, but now understood as attempts to control my appearance so I wouldn't socially embarrass them. That morning, as I took off the navy blue dress I'd chosen with such care, I saw myself in the closet mirror, and for the first time in years, I truly saw myself as others saw me. A 67-year-old woman with gray hair, deep wrinkles on her face, rough hands from so much sewing, and clothes that, though clean and well-kept, couldn't compete with the elegant standards of the social circle Michael now belonged to. A woman who represented the humble past he preferred to keep discreet in his prosperous married life. And it was there, standing in front of that mirror at 3 in the morning, that something fundamental broke inside my heart. Not in a dramatic or explosive way, but like a silent crack that suddenly allowed me to see the truth I'd been avoiding for months. My son no longer needed me as a present and participating mother. He needed me as a distant, manageable memory, as a family obligation to be met occasionally, but one that didn't interfere with his real life. The next day, Sunday morning, while having coffee in my small kitchen, I began to recall all the signs I'd ignored over the last year. Michael's increasingly spaced out visits, always in a hurry with Sophia waiting for him in the car, the increasingly short phone calls where he seemed to be doing other things while talking to me, the family invitations that arrived later and later, as if they had debated whether or not to include me for a long time, and I particularly remembered a phone conversation I'd accidentally overheard 3 months earlier, when Michael had come to visit and received a call from Sophia while he was in the bathroom. She didn't know I was in the living room and spoke loudly. "Are you done over there? Brooke invited us to lunch and I don't want to be late just because we're visiting." And when Michael came out, I lied saying I'd gone to the garden so not to make him feel bad, but those words had been engraved in my memory. Just because we're visiting, as if coming to see his own mother was a chore to be completed quickly. Over the next 2 weeks, I decided to conduct a silent experiment. I stopped calling Michael to see how long it would take him to contact me spontaneously, stopped sending good morning and good night texts, stopped asking about Sophia or their weekend plans, simply waited to see if my communicative absence would be noticed, and the results were revealing and painful. Michael took 8 days to call me, and when he did, it was to ask me for a favor. He wanted me to embroider the initials on some new shirts he'd bought for work. He didn't ask how I was, didn't mention that I'd been strangely silent, didn't show curiosity about my life or activities, simply saw me as a useful resource he could turn to when he needed something specific. I agreed to embroider the shirts. But while working on them in the evenings, I began planning profound changes in how I related to the family. Not dramatic changes or elaborate revenge, but silent adjustments in my expectations and in the emotional energy I invested in relationships that clearly weren't reciprocated with the same level of affection and respect. And it was then that I started noticing other details I'd previously overlooked. During these years of widowhood, I'd kept my house immaculate and my table always set for family visits that rarely came. Saved money for generous gifts on birthdays and Christmas, but the gifts I received in return were always cheap and thoughtless. Hosted elaborate family dinners where I cooked for everyone but was never invited to similar events at their houses. The previous week had been particularly revealing. Sophia had posted photos on Facebook of a family dinner at her parents' house, with Michael smiling alongside all of his in-laws. I had not been invited or even mentioned the gathering, and when I casually asked Michael about the dinner, he said it had been something improvised, very intimate, and that Sophia had thought I wouldn't like the kind of food they prepared. Kind lies to justify a deliberate exclusion. 3 weeks after the wedding, while embroidering napkins no one had asked for, but which I did out of habit, the phone rang. It was Sophia. "Mother Peril, are you busy on Saturday? My mom wants to get to know you better, and we thought we'd have a small family lunch." Her tone that of someone fulfilling an uncomfortable social obligation. "What are we cooking?" I asked automatically, assuming I'd have to help with the preparation. "Oh no, don't worry. My mom has everything organized. Just come as a guest." On Saturday, I arrived at Sophia's parents' house in Buckhead with a dessert I'd specially prepared, a rich coconut custard pie that had taken me all morning to perfect. The house was beautiful, much larger than mine, with a sprawling lawn and elegant furniture that evidenced a superior financial position. And Sophia's parents, Cynthia and Robert, greeted me with correct but cold courtesy throughout the meal. The conversation revolved around topics I didn't know well: the trips they'd taken, the expensive restaurants they'd eaten at, the investments they were considering making. And when I tried to participate by telling an anecdote from my work as a seamstress or my experience raising Michael alone, I noticed that conversations abruptly stopped and were redirected toward other topics, as if my life experiences weren't interesting or relevant enough for that social environment. Sophia would translate my comments as if they needed explanation. My mother-in-law worked for many years sewing from home, or Eleanor went through very tough times when Michael was little, always with a tone that sounded somewhere between compassionate and condescending. And that afternoon, while I helped clear the dishes, even though they insisted it wasn't necessary, I overheard Cynthia comment softly to Sophia in the kitchen, "She's a very hardworking woman, but you can tell she comes from a very different background than ours. I hope Michael finds a balance between maintaining the family relationship and not compromising his new social status." with Sophia responding, "Yes, it's complicated, but Michael understands he has different responsibilities now." I returned home that night with a painful but liberating clarity. It wasn't just my imagination or my exaggerated sensitivity. There was a subtle, consistent campaign to minimize my presence in Michael's new life. Not malicious or consciously cruel, but the natural evolution of a family that had ascended socially and now saw the humble mother as an obstacle to their complete integration into a higher social circle. During the following days, I began to look at my own house with different eyes. The family photos filling the walls, the letters Michael had written me from college thanking me for all the sacrifices he's made for me. "Thank you for all the sacrifices you've made for me. I'll never forget how hard you worked to pay for my degree." Every letter a promise of a future where my effort would be recognized and rewarded. But now reading them again, I realized that Michael had technically kept his promises. He'd offered me occasional financial help, verbally thanked me for my sacrifices, never publicly denied what I'd done for him, but something more subtle had been lost along the way. Genuine respect, natural inclusion, love that needs no explanation or justification. I'd been gradually replaced by a more convenient version of myself. A mother who existed only when necessary and disappeared when she might be problematic. The Wednesday of that week, while organizing the bills from the last few months, I found the receipts for all the extra expenses I had incurred during Michael's courtship and engagement. Small amounts that individually didn't seem significant, but when added up, represented almost 6 months of my full pension. The $50 I lent them when Sophia wanted to upgrade the refrigerator before they got married, the $100 I spent on special ingredients to make the test cake they wanted for the wedding, the $30 for the engagement gift Sophia had specifically chosen, the $20 worth of gas I spent going to try on dresses with her because she needed an older woman's opinion. Every expense had been presented as a temporary emergency or an investment in the couple's happiness, but it had never been reimbursed or even mentioned afterward. It wasn't that I expected the money back, but it bothered me that I had been so naive not to realize I was being used as a convenient economic resource while simultaneously being excluded as an inconvenient social presence. On Thursday morning, my best friend Maria came to visit, as she had done every week for 20 years. Maria had been my confidant throughout all the difficult years of widowhood, the only person who truly knew all my sacrifices and struggles to raise Michael. She sat in the kitchen while I made coffee and immediately noticed my different mood. "What's wrong, Eleanor? You seem very quiet." I told her everything. The wedding, Sophia's comments, the conversation with Michael, the request to be less socially visible. Maria listened without interrupting, but I saw a sadness in her eyes that confirmed what was happening to me was not just my exaggerated imagination. "Look, honey," she said when I finished talking, "I've seen this happen in a lot of families in the neighborhood. The kids get educated, get good jobs, marry girls from a better background, and little by little, they leave behind everything that reminds them where they came from. It's not that they're bad, they're just ashamed of their humble past." Her words hurt because they confirmed what I had been afraid to recognize. "But Michael's not like that," I protested weakly. "He's never denied that we come from a working-class family." Maria took my hand across the table. "No, honey, he doesn't deny it when he's alone with you. But when was the last time Sophia came to this house? When was the last time Michael took you to meet his coworkers? When was the last time he included you in his plans without you having to ask?" Maria's questions forced me to face a reality I had been avoiding. Sophia had come to my house exactly 3 times in 2 years of dating, always for very short periods and always with excuses to leave quickly. Michael had never invited me to any of his work events, not even the holiday parties where families were included. When I suggested family plans, there were always reasons why it was better to wait for a more convenient time. "What would you do if you were me?" I asked Maria, feeling for the first time that I truly needed someone else's advice. I think you have to decide what you want for the rest of your life, she replied. Do you want to continue being the mother who is always available when they need her, but becomes invisible when it's convenient? Or do you want to live for yourself for the first time in 30 years? That afternoon, after Maria left, I sat in my favorite rocking chair and began a mental exercise I had never done before, imagining what my life would be like if I wasn't constantly worried about Michael and Sophia. What would I do with my free evenings if I wasn't embroidering gifts that no one truly appreciated? How would I spend my money if I wasn't setting aside amounts for family emergencies that always seemed to pop up? What plans would I make if I didn't have to keep my schedule flexible in case they needed me? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream of personal projects. I had always wanted to learn to use a computer so I could communicate with old coworkers who had moved to other cities. I had wanted to take more advanced embroidery classes to perfect techniques I only knew by sight. I had wanted to travel to Charleston to visit my sister Lydia, who had invited me many times, but whom I always told I couldn't leave the house alone in case Michael needed me. On Friday night, while having dinner alone in front of the television, the phone rang. It was Michael. "Hi, Mom. How are you? I was just calling to say hello." "Fine, son. Just doing my thing," I replied, keeping my own voice neutral. "Have you thought about what we talked about the other day?" I could detect the anxiety behind the casual question. He wanted confirmation that I had fully accepted his request to reduce my presence in his social life. "Yes, I've thought about it a lot, and I think you're right. It's better for everyone to have their own space." I heard the relief in his breathing. "I'm so glad you see it that way, Mom. I don't want you to think we don't love you. We just want everyone to be comfortable." After hanging up, I kept thinking about that word, comfortable. It was interesting how their comfort required my discomfort, how their peace of mind needed my silence. Over the weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I didn't plan anything with Michael in mind. I didn't cook his favorite food in case he decided to visit. I didn't clean the house extra in case they came with Sophia. I didn't dress up in case they invited me out. I simply lived my weekend as if I were completely independent, and the feeling was strangely liberating. On Sunday morning, I went to Mass alone at St. Thomas Parish, where I had gone for 20 years, but where I had lately only shown up when Michael and Sophia had other plans for me. After Mass, I stayed to chat with Constance, a woman my age who had recently been widowed and who always asked about Michael with genuine interest. "And how is the young man? Has he gotten used to married life?" she asked as we walked toward the exit. For the first time, I decided to be completely honest. "Well, yes, he's getting very used to it. So used to it that he barely needs his mother anymore." Constance looked at me with understanding. "Oh, honey, that happens with all children when they get married. You raise them thinking they'll be our companions forever, but the truth is, you're raising them to leave." Her words hurt because they confirmed what I had been afraid to recognize. "But Michael's not like that," I protested weakly. "He's never denied that we come from a working-class family." Maria took my hand across the table. "No, honey, he doesn't deny it when he's alone with you. But when was the last time Sophia came to this house? When was the last time Michael took you to meet his coworkers? When was the last time he included you in his plans without you having to ask?" Maria's questions forced me to face a reality I had been avoiding. Sophia had come to my house exactly 3 times in 2 years of dating, always for very short periods and always with excuses to leave quickly. Michael had never invited me to any of his work events, not even the holiday parties where families were included. When I suggested family plans, there were always reasons why it was better to wait for a more convenient time. "What would you do if you were me?" I asked Maria, feeling for the first time that I truly needed someone else's advice. "I think you have to decide what you want for the rest of your life," she replied.
Do you want to continue being the mother who is always available when they need her, but becomes invisible when it's convenient? Or do you want to live for yourself for the first time in 30 years? That afternoon, after Maria left, I sat in my favorite rocking chair and began a mental exercise I had never done before, imagining what my life would be like if I wasn't constantly worried about Michael and Sophia. What would I do with my free evenings if I wasn't embroidering gifts that no one truly appreciated? How would I spend my money if I wasn't setting aside amounts for family emergencies that always seemed to pop up? What plans would I make if I didn't have to keep my schedule flexible in case they needed me? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream of personal projects. I had always wanted to learn to use a computer so I could communicate with old coworkers who had moved to other cities. I had wanted to take more advanced embroidery classes to perfect techniques I only knew by sight. I had wanted to travel to Charleston to visit my sister Lydia, who had invited me many times, but whom I always told I couldn't leave the house alone in case Michael needed me. On Friday night, while having dinner alone in front of the television, the phone rang. It was Michael. "Hi, Mom. How are you? I was just calling to say hello." His voice had that careful tone he used when he wanted to make sure I wasn't upset about something. "Fine, son. Just doing my thing," I replied, keeping my own voice neutral. "Have you thought about what we talked about the other day?" I could detect the anxiety behind the casual question. He wanted confirmation that I had fully accepted his request to reduce my presence in his social life. "Yes, I've thought about it a lot, and I think you're right. It's better for everyone to have their own space." I heard the relief in his breathing. "I'm so glad you see it that way, Mom. I don't want you to think we don't love you. We just want everyone to be comfortable." After hanging up, I kept thinking about that word, comfortable. It was interesting how their comfort required my discomfort, how their peace of mind needed my silence. Over the weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I didn't plan anything with Michael in mind. I didn't cook his favorite food in case he decided to visit. I didn't clean the house extra in case they came with Sophia. I didn't dress up in case they invited me out. I simply lived my weekend as if I were completely independent, and the feeling was strangely liberating. On Sunday morning, I went to Mass alone at St. Thomas Parish, where I had gone for 20 years, but where I had lately only shown up when Michael and Sophia didn't have other plans for me. After Mass, I stayed to chat with Constance, a woman my age who had recently been widowed, and who always asked about Michael with genuine interest. "And how is the young man? Has he gotten used to married life?" she asked as we walked toward the exit. For the first time, I decided to be completely honest. Well, yes, he's getting very used to it, so used to it that he barely needs his mother anymore. Constance looked at me with understanding. "Oh, honey, that happens with all children when they get married. You raise them thinking they'll be our companions forever, but the truth is, you're raising them to leave." Her words were like a flash of clarity. All these years, I had thought I was investing in a relationship that would grow stronger over time. But in reality, I had been preparing Michael to become completely independent of me. The problem wasn't that he had pulled away. The problem was that I hadn't prepared to live my own life when I was no longer needed as an active mother. That afternoon, I decided to do something symbolic but important. I completely reorganized my house to work for me alone, not as a space always ready to receive family visits. I stored the extra dining chairs. I turned the guest room into my own sewing studio. I moved my favorite books to the main living area instead of keeping them hidden in the bedroom. I changed the kitchen layout to be more comfortable for a single person. Every small change was a declaration of emotional independence. This house was no longer going to be a museum of motherhood, where everything was preserved for the convenience of a son who came less and less. It was going to be the home of Eleanor Perrell, a 67-year-old woman who had finally decided to live for herself.
On Monday morning, I started implementing more significant changes. I called the computer school at the community center and enrolled in the basic course that started that week. I called my sister Lydia in Charleston and told her I wanted to visit her next month. I went to the bank and opened a separate savings account where I deposited half of my pension, money that would no longer be available for Michael and Sophia's family emergencies. Every action was small, individually, but together they represented a silent revolution in how I lived. For 30 years, I had been Michael's mother. Now it was time to discover who Eleanor was when she wasn't defined solely by her maternal function. On Tuesday afternoon, while practicing on my new computer, which I had bought that very morning from money from my personal savings, I received a call from Sophia. "Mother Peril, how are you? I'm calling because my mom wants to invite you to lunch on Saturday. Nothing formal, just a ladies' lunch." It was the first time Sophia had called me directly in weeks, and I could detect something artificial in her overly friendly tone. "Will Michael be there?" "No, it's just a ladies' lunch. My mom, my Aunt Rose, you, and me." I thought for a moment. 3 weeks ago, I would have immediately accepted, grateful for any family inclusion. But now I had the perspective to recognize that this was probably an attempt to fulfill the social obligation of including the mother-in-law occasionally, while maintaining control over when and how that inclusion happened. "Sophia, thank you very much for the invitation, but I already have plans for Saturday," I said, surprising myself with the ease of my refusal. "Oh, well, don't worry, we'll do it another time," she replied, and I could hear the surprise in her voice. She had clearly expected me to automatically accept any crumb of family attention offered. After hanging up, I realized I really did have plans for Saturday, my first advanced computer class, and a visit to the San Juan market to buy materials for my personal embroidery projects. Plans I had made thinking only of my own enjoyment, without considering whether they interfered with Michael and Sophia's needs or wishes. On Wednesday, I received an unexpected call from my sister-in-law, Vanessa, the one who had been especially cold to me at the wedding. "Eleanor, how are you? I'm calling because my son Jordan is having his first communion next month, and we wanted to invite you." Another invitation that arrived weeks in advance, probably after much family debate about whether or not to include me. "Vanessa, thank you very much for thinking of me. Can I confirm next week? I am organizing my calendar and want to be sure I can attend properly." It was a diplomatic answer that gave me time to decide if I truly wanted to participate in family events or my presence was merely tolerated rather than desired. On Thursday night, while having a quiet dinner in my reorganized kitchen, I realized something fundamental. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel anxious waiting for phone calls. I wasn't watching the phone hoping Michael would need me for something. I wasn't mentally preparing excuses in case I had to cancel my own plans to attend to a family emergency. This new emotional independence hadn't arrived with dramatic pain, but with a gradual serenity that surprised me. It was as if I had been carrying an invisible weight for years, and had finally given myself permission to put it down. The love for Michael remained intact, but it was no longer mixed with the constant anxiety of proving I deserved his attention and respect. On Friday morning, while having breakfast and reading a book I had bought simply because I liked the cover, another luxury I hadn't allowed myself in years, the phone rang. It was Michael, but this time his voice held a note of confusion. "Mom, Sophia told me you can't go to lunch on Saturday. Is everything okay? Are you feeling sick?" "No, son. I'm perfectly fine. I just have other commitments." "What commitments?" he asked, and I could detect the genuine surprise in his voice. Evidently, it hadn't occurred to him that his mother could have a social life independent of her availability for family events. "I taking computer classes and I have things to do for the house," I explained, keeping my tone casual.
"Oh," was all he replied, as if he was processing the information that his mother had priorities that didn't revolve around him. After hanging up, I kept thinking about that conversation. For years, any family invitation had automatically been my highest priority, regardless of what other plans I might have. Michael had grown up expecting that unconditional availability as something natural. Now, encountering boundaries for the first time, he didn't know how to interpret the situation. That afternoon, while organizing my new embroidery materials in my personal studio, I received a text message from Sophia. "Mother Peril, I hope you're not upset about something. If there's a problem, we can talk." It was interesting how my simple refusal to be immediately available had been interpreted as a sign of conflict. For years, my compliance had been so predictable that any different behavior was seen as problematic. I replied with a calm message. "I'm not upset, Sophia. I am just organizing my time differently. Thank you very much for the invitation." It was a response that made it clear there was no drama, but also offered no extensive explanations or apologies for having my own priorities. Saturday was the first day in years that I dedicated completely to my own interests. In the morning, I went to my computer class, where I met other women my age who were also learning technology after dedicating themselves exclusively to their families. In the afternoon, I went to the market and bought colored threads I had never used, special fabrics I had admired, but never allowed myself to buy for personal projects. That night, while having dinner in my quiet kitchen, I realized I had spent an entire day without thinking about Michael and Sophia, except occasionally. It was the first time in decades that my mind was occupied with my own projects, my own learning, my own satisfactions. The feeling was strange, but deeply reassuring. On Sunday morning, while watering the plants in my small garden, my neighbor Maria approached the fence separating our houses. "Say, honey, doesn't Michael come on Sundays anymore? I haven't seen him around here for weeks." It was an innocent question, but one that made me reflect on how my internal changes were starting to become visible externally. "Well, he's married now, right? Everyone has their own life," I replied, surprised by the naturalness of my answer. 3 weeks ago, I would have immediately explained in detail the reasons why Michael was coming less, probably justifying his absence and minimizing any impression that there were family problems. Maria nodded with understanding. "That's life, honey. The children grow up and you have to learn to live for yourself again. And how are you doing? How are you organizing yourself?" It was the first time someone had specifically asked about my well-being independent of my family situation. "Very well," I said, and realized it was completely true. I'm learning new things, doing projects I had put off. I'm really enjoying having time for myself. Maria smiled. "I'm so glad to hear that. You seem very
Peaceful lately." That afternoon, while working on a complex embroidery piece I was doing just because I liked the design, not because it was a gift for someone, I reflected on the profound changes that had occurred within me over those 2 weeks. The initial pain of recognizing my new position in Michael's life had transformed into something more constructive. The determination to build an identity that did not depend on my function as a mother. For the first time in 30 years, Eleanor Perral was living for Eleanor Perral. And contrary to what I had feared, the world had not collapsed. Michael and Sophia were perfectly fine without my constant attention. The house was still functioning without being constantly ready for unexpected family visits. My life had rhythm and purpose without being centered on the needs of others. It was as if I had been holding my breath for decades and had finally given myself permission to exhale completely. The air entering my lungs was different, cleaner, fresher, completely mine. The real transformation began exactly 3 weeks after my conversation with Michael on a Monday morning when I decided to do something I had never done in my 67 years of life. Write a list of everything I wanted to achieve, thinking only of my own happiness without considering how it would affect Michael, Sophia, or anyone else in my family. Sitting at my sewing table, now converted into a personal desk with a new notebook bought specifically for this purpose, and I began to write without censoring myself. I want to learn to use the computer well to communicate with people my age who have similar interests. I want to travel to Charleston to see Lydia and stay as long as I want without asking if anyone needs me at home. I want to take advanced embroidery classes at the Community Art Center. I want to buy new clothes that I like, not what is appropriate for a woman my age. I want to go to the movies alone without feeling I have to justify why I'm not accompanied. Every line a small declaration of independence. For the first time in decades, formulating desires that had nothing to do with being useful to others, but with discovering who I was when not defined by my family roles. That same afternoon, I began implementing my list systematically and silently, calling the Buckhead Art Center to enroll in the artistic embroidery workshop starting on Thursday without mentioning this decision to anyone, simply making it, as any independent adult would. Then going to the mall to buy 3 bright colored blouses that caught my eye, without wondering if they were too youthful or if Michael would approve. On Tuesday, I booked my bus ticket to Charleston for the following week with an open return, telling Lydia over the phone when she asked how long I'd stay, something that surprised me. I don't know exactly. It depends on how good I feel there. The first time in years, making plans without a predetermined deadline based on Michael's potential needs. On Wednesday, I did something even more radical, going to the bank to completely modify the distribution of my pension, dividing my income into 4 categories: basic household expenses, personal savings, a real emergency fund, and a monthly budget for personal activities and pleasures. Instead of keeping all the money available in checking for family emergencies, for the first time in my adult life, destining a significant portion exclusively for my enjoyment. These small changes representing a silent revolution in how I lived. After 30 years operating as if my life were a shared resource where decisions, time, and money were always subject to Michael's needs, now reclaiming complete autonomy with the quiet determination of someone who had finally understood her own worth. On Thursday, in my first embroidery class, I met a group of women who would change my perspective on what it meant to be an independent older woman. Renata, 72, who had started painting professionally after being widowed at 65, Helena, 69, who had learned to drive cross-country and now traveled alone all over, Miranda, 71, who had gone back to school and just finished her GED, all of them having lived decades dedicated to families and now discovering talents and passions unexplored. Renata telling me while we practiced a new shading technique, "The secret is to stop asking for permission to live your own life. Our kids aren't children who need us to survive anymore, but we're still alive and have the right to do things that make us happy." Her words resonated because they expressed what I'd felt but couldn't articulate. Helena adding she'd spent 40 years waiting for invites from kids and husband until realizing she had the right to make her own plans and invite whomever. Miranda completing that we teach children, mom is always available, always says yes, puts their needs first, then are surprised when treated that way. The conversation like hearing my thoughts from wiser voices, realizing I wasn't alone in confusing motherhood with self-negation or raising successful kids at the cost of forgetting myself. And importantly, it wasn't too late to change. On Friday, armed with this perspective, I made a decision unthinkable 3 weeks ago when Michael called asking if I could watch Vanessa's kids Saturday as she and her husband wanted to go out with no one else. The kind of request I'd automatically accepted for years, canceling personal plans. "Michael," I said, calmly, surprising myself, "I won't be able to. I already have commitments." Him asking what with genuine surprise, like before. Me explaining movies with embroidery friends, then dinner. True, as we'd planned it. Him protesting Vanessa needed someone trusted, revealing I'd been the automatic solution not because best, but because never said no. I replied, surely they'd find another, babysitters or Vanessa's friends. Him silent, processing I wasn't offering alternatives. Asking if everything okay, noticing I'm different. Me affirming I'm well, just organizing time differently by including what I like, not just family needs. After hanging, realizing I'd crossed a crucial line, putting my plans over non-urgent family need. Michael explaining to Vanessa, Mom no longer auto-available, a small revolutionary change. On Saturday, I had an experience absent for decades, a day of adult fun with age-shared interest women, seeing a Mexican film about an older widow changing her life. Then dinner where none cooked, served, or cleaned, talking projects, books, trips, rediscovering dormant self. Eleanor, the woman, not just Michael's mother. No calls asking where or when back. Them sorting weekend without me as should be among independent adults. On Sunday morning, over quiet breakfast reading Helena's Lent book on women reinventing after 60, Sophia called with veiled irritation about Vanessa telling I couldn't watch kids, hoping no discomfort. Me replying simply had other plans, politely firm. Her saying Vanessa had to cancel, thinking misunderstanding. Fascinating how refusal seen as a problem needing fix. Me clarifying, no misunderstanding, I have social life too. Vanessa had days to organize sitter. Her silent, not expecting direct defense. Finally, just ensuring okay. Everything fine, thank you. After, I set precedent. Personal decisions need no justifications, apologies to family. That afternoon, packing for Charleston trip next day, reflecting on profound transformation, silent evolution, emotional independence. Early Monday, waiting bus text Michael, told Sophia trip, why not sooner, when back. Interesting, personal trip treated as needing approval. Replying from the bus, I'm 67, adult, no permission needed visit family, back when over, love both. Establishing loving boundaries, loving without reporting every move. During 4-hour trip watching scenery, reflecting woman 3 weeks ago versus now. Difference, not stopped loving Michael, but stopped his approval as self-worth measure. His happiness important, but not more than mine. Lydia greeting with joy, noting I looked relaxed, confirming internal changes external. First night dinner on porch, chatting deceased siblings, youth memories, plans left to live, realizing years since conversation without Michael mentioned. Simply Eleanor talking sister on mutual interests as adult women. Lydia after hearing classes friends saying always thought too dedicated to Michael. Not wrong, good mother, but forgot to be Eleanor. Admitting right, but never too late remember who you are. Her smiling 60s, 70s woman's best if permission live for self. That night, guest room piece absent years, not worried Michael needs home organized, absence inconvenience, just enjoying chosen experience with sister. Next 5 days, continuous revelation, Lydia taking to sweetgrass basket workshops, artists starting after 60, colonial churches admiring antique needlework unrushed, artisan market buying materials without justifying expense, rediscovering dormant personality, opinions on art, debating history, enjoying aimless walks unfamiliar streets, reconnecting pre-maternal role self. Wednesday, stay Michael called, revealing changes affecting dynamic. When exactly back, Sophia's organizing family dinner weekend, need to know available. Me from the porch admiring harbor, don't know exactly, comfortable with sister. What? Mean bought return.